When we are doing normalization, functional dependencies are important to understand. It is a method which determines the relationship between attributes. And because of functional dependency, it becomes possible to understand that how one column is related with the another column. So X is determining Y. So Y is the dependent attribute and it is the determinant attribute, or it is also called as Y is determined by X. Now let's take the first scenario. In the first scenario, there are two columns in the table, student ID and student name. So ID is one, name is Ranjit. Again, the similar thing is repeated over here. So that is not the issue because the same name is identified by one ID. So it is a valid functional dependency case. Now ID is 1, ID is 2, name is Ranjit. But this is also a valid case because the two different students may have the same name. Now one is Ranjit, the second one is Varun. This is of course valid. Now one is Ranjit and one is Varun. This will not be valid because this is supposed to be a primary key, unique value, and the unique primary key will not going to determine the two different attributes over here. So there are basically two types of functional dependencies, trivial and non-trivial. If X is determining Y is a functional dependency and Y is a subset of X, it is called as a trivial. And if Y is not a subset of X, it is called as non-trivial functional dependency. Now, these are basic properties of functional dependencies which will going to help us in understanding about the different normal forms and their conditions. The first property of the functional dependency is reflexivity. If Y is a subset of X, then X determines Y. This is called as reflexivity. And every attribute will always determine itself. And every attribute is a subset of itself. So reflexivity always holds in this particular case. Now, augmentation. If X is determining Y, if SID is determining S name, then XZ will determine YZ, the common attribute which we are attaching to these two columns, these two attributes. SID dot phone number will always determine S name dot phone number because SID is determining S name or S name is determined by SID. Transitivity. If X is determining Y and Y is determining Z, then X will determine Z. Means, for example, SID is determining S name is determining CT, then SID will determine the CT. Union. If X is determining Y and X is determining Z, then X will determine YZ. Decomposition. If X is determining YZ, then X will determine Y and X will determine Z because YZ is determined by X. So the single attribute will always determine by X. But following is not true. A group of two attribute is determining Z. Then that alone attribute cannot determine Z. Pseudo transitivity. If X is determining Y and WY is determining Z, then this particular W can also be, this particular column can be also attached or multiplied with X. WX will determine Z. Composition, combining the two columns over here, X is determining Y, Z is determining W. So XZ a group of these two will determine the YW. So these are all different basic characteristics of the functional dependencies, and this is also helps us in understanding about the normalization. When we actually creating a good relational design, so there are these few features that we need to take into the consideration, or these are the features of any good relational design. It reflects the real world structure problem, क्योंकि क्या होता है कि जो प्रैक्टिकल सिनारियोज में प्रॉब्लम्स होते हैं, तो उनको रिप्रेजेंट करने के लिए डेटाबेस डिजाइन किया जाता है. इट कैन रिप्रेजेंट ऑल एक्सपेक्टेड डेटा ओवर द टाइम. अवॉइड रिडंडेंट स्टोरेज ऑफ द डेटा आइटम. जो फाइल सिस्टम में होता है वो डेटाबेस सिस्टम में नहीं होता है. प्रोवाइड्स इफिशिएंट एक्सेस टू डेटा, क्योंकि डेटाबेस ही बेसिकली it is basically a group of data and a set of interrelated programs which are working on that data. So insertion, updation, deletion, all these are the features. So whenever we require some data, कभी भी कोई भी डेटा आइटम अगर लगता है तो वो इजीली डेटाबेस से फेच हो सकता है, वो जो फाइल सिस्टम में पॉसिबल नहीं था. सपोर्ट्स द मेंटेनेंस ऑफ डेटा इंटीग्रिटी ओवर द टाइम. इंटीग्रिटी मेंटेन होती है डेटा की. क्लीन, कंसिस्टेंट एंड इजी टू अंडरस्टैंड. दीज आर द फीचर्स ऑफ द गुड रिलेशनल डिजाइन.